23. Further development of the souls in the beyond. The Lord. If now, according to this being and life most necessary and unalterable principle, a so-called poor and naked soul in the beyond immediately gets in contact with a spirit, like, for example, our Raphael here, it would be immediately consumed by him, like the sea consumes a single drop of water. Therefore, care is taken by me throughout the whole of infinity that a small, weak, and still stupid naked life is always kept in isolation, so that it exists individually, as on its own, and only such life potencies are allowed to come near it, which are not very much stronger than the individual life on its own in its isolation and nakedness. Such life potencies cannot consume each other, because the separate I potencies are of the same power and strength. But they still form associations and hold meetings, from which, however, never any good is forthcoming, because the wisdom of each separate being is exactly the same. Imagine a council consisting of a group of very silly people who want to decide something quite wise and to execute it with the combined forces. What will be forthcoming from their meetings? Nothing but silly stuff. Even today, we still have on this earth, and mainly on the islands, nations who are living undisturbed on their islands since the time of Adam. They are descendants of Cain, who are still standing on the same cultural level where they were standing 2,000 years ago. Yes, why don't they have made any progress regarding their culture, but rather have moved backwards with all their many council meetings? Because the most wise among them was sillier and more blind than a still so stupid pig shepherd in this country. But if the most wise does not know anything, what should the others know, who are coming to him for advice? One, of course, can ask here and say, now then, why didn't God send any prophets who are filled with his Spirit to these nations? With that, we have come to the main point. In these nations there still reside two unripe and naked souls. A higher revelation would consume them and would encapsulate them with a judgment from which it would be forever impossible to free them. The highest and purest truth would transform them into the thickest superstition, and they would bind themselves to such an extent to it that in the end even I myself by no means would be able to free them from it. Therefore, it is necessary that they stay as they are for another 1,000 years. Only after such time will they receive visits from pure mind-awakened people. However, not to receive any lessons for quite some time, but only to obtain an awakening example. By doing so from time to time, they will be quite often given such awakening surprises. If this occurs for a few hundred years, then such naked nations will become somewhat more dressed, bodily and in the soul, and only then become in time ripe for a higher revelation. and in exactly the same manner, and even more significantly troublesome, the development and life perfection of a naked nature soul progresses in the beyond. She must be left by herself in complete darkness for as long as she is not pressed by her own suffering. To awaken herself out of her still partly material lethargy, and starts to think about whatever more specific thoughts in her heart. If the thoughts become an increasing distinctive and certain outline, a very faint dawn starts to appear in such a soul, and she starts to get a ground on which she can stand a little, and in time can walk around a little. This walking around corresponds with one thought passing over to the next, and one emotion to another. This is a search, and a search must be followed by a finding, because otherwise the seeker, if for a too long time does not find anything, he finally will tire because of his fruitless troubles and would fall back into his earlier lethargy. But if the diligently searching soul starts to find something, it gives her a new and higher impulse for a further and more diligent search and inquest. And if she then finds signs of a similar being like her own, she pursues this like a tracking dog and does not rest until she has found something, which at least testifies of a close-by being similar to her. By this increased searching, she becomes more ripe and tries to satisfy her hunger and everything, what she, like coincidentally, finds to cover her substantial soul body. Here and there, she even finds something, no matter how meagre, to fill her stomach and to satisfy her burning thirst. Since once a soul becomes properly passionate because of the inner, increasingly livelier life fire, she continuously finds more, for which a need arises in her soul.